I have finished the poetry of Ted Hughes, uh, the poetry of Philip Larkin. I gave my introductory lecture on Seamus Heaney. Then I explained the poem Digging. So I'll continue with that. I gave my introductory lecture on Seamus Heaney, and as you know, the two poems are prescribed in your course. Two poems of Seamus Heaney. One is Digging, and the other is Punishment. So we shall discuss the poem Punishment. And if you recall the lecture of the class, then there are a few points which are related to Seamus Heaney, which you will be remembering. I think that he's an Irish poet, a great playwright, translator, major 20th century poet. He also received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1995. You are studying W. Bates also in your course, who is also an Irish poet. And there was a famous statement by American poet Robert Lowell. He said that regarding Seamus Heaney, that he is the most important Irish poet since W. Bates. So we have, all these points were discussed by me in my introductory lecture in the class. I think you will also remember the statement of Bill Clinton, former president of America, who said that regarding Seamus Heaney, that both his stunning work and his life were a gift to the world. This was a famous statement by Bill Clinton. Now, if you look at the major themes of Seamus Heaney's poetry, that has also been discussed by me in the class, that Seamus Heaney focuses on Irish rituals. He focuses on the people of the bog. He focuses on Irish conflict. So, some important themes which I discussed in the class were his reverence towards the past, that is history, family. And then the second important theme, which I told you, was the depiction of the troubled Ireland. That is a major part of his poetry. Then the loss of the childhood innocence, art of writing, as you find in the poem Digging, autobiographical elements, and tendency to avoid conventional rhyme scheme or traditional stanza length. You'll find out while reading the poem Punishment and other poems. The tone in most of the poem is elegiac. You'll find out, while reading the poem, you'll find out the resemblance in some ways to the English Romantic poets, as far as the focus on nature and the setting in rural landscape is concerned. And then you have the theme of the violence, which is very prominently dealt by him in his poems. Now, all these points I have already discussed in the class. Let us now come to the text Punishment. I'll give a brief introduction of the poem Punishment, then I'll analyze the poem. You please have the text in your hand, but before that I will give a brief introduction of the poem Punishment so that you can easily understand the text. Now, this poem Punishment is one of the significant poems of Seamus Heaney, and it explores the nature of violence, atrocity, and revenge within society. Now, this poem was first published in the book entitled North in 1975. Now, the whole, of the poetry, which was published, all the poems which were published in the collection North, they, discuss the time in Ireland which is known as the Troubles. This is a historical term, which, if you look at the history of Ireland, so most of the poems which were published in this collection, North, they discussed uh, the historical event of Ireland known as the Troubles. What is this Troubles? The Troubles were an ethno-nationalist conflict in Northern Ireland during the late 20th century. This is also known as a Northern Ireland conflict. It is, sometimes described as an irregular war or, low-level war. This conflict began in late 1960s and is usually deemed to have ended with the Good Friday Agreement of 1998. So this was actually the Troubled, which forms the basic part of that collection, which is entitled North. Now, when you read the biography of the poet, in fact, Heaney was a Derry boy, D-double-R, right? Derry boy, and Derry was the location of the majority of the conflict during the revolutionary struggle in Ireland. In Derry and other areas of conflict, primarily the region of Ulster, telling you some historical details of Ireland. Now, members of IRA means Irish Revolutionary Army. They brutally punished those who harbored, protected, or sympathized with the British people. Now, during the Troubles, the historical event, the Irish Republican Army, that is IRA, was known to have used tarring and feathering. Look at the word tarring and feathering as to way to punish Irish women who were involved with British soldiers. I mean, this is the historical events I'm telling you. So these British, tarring and feathering. Now look at the word tarring and feathering. This tarring and feathering, is a form of public torture and humiliation used to enforce unofficial justice or revenge. It was used in feudal Europe and its colonies in the early, modern period, and it is a kind of mob, vengeance. Heaney wrote this poem along with 7 others, originally published as a collection which is entitled Bog Poems, in response to the discovery of several bog bodies. This poem by Seamus Heaney was inspired by the discovery of a dead body of a young girl who was believed to be killed on the charge of adultery. Now, the inspiration for the bog body poems, as I told you that he wrote bog body poems, the inspiration for the bog body poems came after Heaney read the book The Bog People by P.V. Glob, a 1965 archaeological study of bodies that were preserved in the bogs of Northern Europe. Now, this poem follows 2 time scales: the Iron Age and the discovery of a body of a woman preserved in a bog, and the Northern Ireland Troubles. It is thought that the body Heaney had in mind was Windby from North Germany, a woman believed to have been executed for adultery, but he tried to relocate that particular event with the story of Ireland. This poem, putting brutality, atrocity at the center, links past and present, history and modern time, then and now, there and here. Now, when you read the poem, you'll find out that the attitude of the poet is quite, sympathetic, empathetic in this poem. he empathizes with the persona, with the character. The poet shows his, sorrow and pity to the girl, and there is a stanza in the poem where the phrase "my poor scapegoat" has been used. So the poet shows his sorrow and pity to the girl by saying, "my poor scapegoat," which indicates she alone is the victim of the so-called crime of, adultery. Uh, since her partner is not punished because he is a male, uh, she alone is punished for their so-called criminal act, and she became a scapegoat. Now, crime which is committed by both man and a woman, only a woman pays. I think you are reminded of the novel by Thomas Hardy, that is Tess of the D'Urbervilles, a pure woman. There is a section in the novel, "A Woman Pays." And the question is, when a crime is committed by both man and a woman, why only a woman pays? So you can give the reference of that, also. Now in this poem, as I told you in the beginning, that that the poet links past and present. He compares the brutality, atrocity, and violent nature of tribal men of the first century AD, and brutality of this IRA, that is Irish Revolutionary Army. No, in both past and present, innocents are victimized for the crime. In Ireland, Irish girls who married British soldiers were brutally killed by Irish Revolutionary armies. The marriage between the Irish girl and the British soldiers was taken as an act of, betraying Irish nationalism or Irish revolution. Uh, as you find in the text, you're betraying, sisters. When you read the text, you'll find out. This poem consists of 11, quatrains. They do not have any, fixed rhyme scheme, and we have the use of enjambment in the poem. And when you say enjambment, it means, the flow of thought without punctuation. It moves from one stanza to the, other. Now, there are so many points which are related to this, poem. Like there is a novel for teenagers, and it is called Bog Child. This novel was written by Siobhan Dodd, Siobhan Siobhan Dodd. The novel Bog Child, and it is inspired. It's a historical novel, and it was later on published by David Fickling in September 2008. And Siobhan Dodd was a British writer and activist, and this novel was set in 1980s amid the backdrop of troubles of Northern Ireland. Now, in this poem, the most significant is the theme of violence, atrocity, revenge. The violence in the poem also prompts the speaker, to feel remorseful and ashamed, because he says that I'll tell you the poem, that I cannot do anything. I'll only be an observer. He, imagines himself that he is only a witness, a bystander, and he will not be able to intervene actually. And he says that I stood, dumb. You'll find out there. Now, this is probably be an perfect allusion to Heaney's, personal experience of witnessing acts of violence carried out by the IRA in, Ireland. So, what you see in this poem, that in this poem, Heaney is describing a woman who was punished and killed, later to be thrown in a bog. This was a very common practice of ancient tribes, and these bogs were also used for ritual, sacrifice. In this poem, the young girl has been punished for, adultery, and he draws a parallel between, past and the, present. The speaker of the poem, who is the poet himself, writes with empathy and sorrow for the young girl who was brutally violated for a crime directed towards her gender. And as I told you, that he places himself as a witness, a silent, observer, and he cannot intervene in all these, activities. He cannot raise the voice against these atrocities. So let us now, start the poem. Now, you just please have a text in your hand. Uh, this poem, Punishment, as I told you, written in free verse. 11 stanzas are there. Description of a girl who is charged for adultery, and that is why she was punished, killed, thrown in the bog. Ultimately, the body was, recovered. So look at the poem. I can feel the tug of the halter at the nape of her neck, the wind on her naked front. I can feel, and look at the personal touch, the empathy which is shown by the speaker, by the poet from the very beginning. Now, the word I makes the poem very personal. I can feel the tug. Now, when she was, he's imagining actually the situation, the way she was punished and thrown in the bog. So he says, I can feel the tug of the halter. What is halter? Halter is actually the noose, NWS, noose. A rope for, leading animals or hanging criminals. Noose. Nape is the back of the neck. So the poet says, I can feel the tug. Tug means pull. I can feel the pull of the nose at the back part of her, neck. The wind on her naked front, it blows her nipples to amber, orange color, amber beads. It shakes the frail, weak rigging of her ribs. When the wind is blowing, then he gives this kind of description. Now, nape of her neck, beautiful use of alliteration. Rigging of her ribs, beautiful use of alliteration. Now, I can see her drowned. Now, the poet is visualizing, imagining, as if he were the witness to that horrific, image. I can see her drowned body in the bog. I visualize the drowned body in the bog. Again, body in the bog, alliteration. And body was drowned in the bog. How the body sunk into the bog? The weighing stone, the floating rods and boughs, branches of the trees. So the dead body, and with the dead body, what was tied? The rods, boughs, and weighing stone, so that body will sink properly. The body will go properly in the bog. So he said, I visualize, I see all these things, under which at first she was a barked sapling. Beautiful use of metaphor here. She was a barked sapling, peeled. She was just like a peeled sapling, and when it was dug up, it became as hard. Her bones became as hard as oak, and brain like container. How was she punished? Now I also remember sometimes that we in the newspapers we also read sometimes the cases of honor killing, and the honor killing, the lovers are killed, sometimes brutally killed. Though this is a very heinous crime which is committed. So the poet, says that I visualize all the. I visualize her shaved, head. Head was also, shaved. It was also a kind of punishment for the humiliation. like a stubble of black corn. What is stubble? Again, we have like a stubble of black corn. Beautiful use of similes here. Stubble is actually the short parts of the corn, wheat, um, corn-like wheat, etc., that are left standing after the rest has been cut. When the corn is cut and some part of it is left, so that is stubble of the black corn. Shaped head is just like a stubble of a black corn. Her blindfold swirled bandage, her noose a ring. So eyes were also blindfolded. That became also swirled, noose a ring, to store the memories of love. You see, how does the look at the thought actually of this stanza, which is moving swiftly to the next stanza. This, in literary language, this is called enjambment, enjambment. So thoughts are enjambment. Her noose a ring to store the memories of love. Little adulteress, you are an adulteress. You are an adulteress. That is why you are punished. Now, before they punished you, what kind of image was there? What kind of person you were before they punished you? You were a flaxen haired, golden, flaxen, golden. You were golden haired, undernourished, and your tar black face was beautiful, my poor scapegoat. When the word poor scapegoat was used, again, the poet is feeling pity for her, sympathy for her, because she is scapegoat. Actually, she is punished, on the behalf of the other persons who have done the crime. So you were flaxen haired, undernourished, and your tar black face was beautiful, my poor black scapegoat. I almost love you, but would have cast, I know, the stones of silence. I love you, I know that I almost love you. But had I been there at this situation, I would have thrown the stones of silence. I'm artful oer. Oer means observer. I'm a silent observer. I'm in standby. I could not have interfered actually. He says, I know the stones of silence. As I told you that in Ireland, marriage between the Irish, girls and British soldiers was viewed as an act of, betraying Irish nationalism. So, these girls were killed by the Irish army. So, the poet is trying to put, link past and present. So, of your brain's exposed and darkened combs, your muscles, webbing, and all your numbered bones. So the body was brought out actually. The brain was exposed like the combs, muscles, bones which could be numbered. So all these things he could see. I who have stood dumb when your betraying sisters called in tar wept by the railings. I would have stood, dumb. So the time is now shifting to the northern, Ireland. I who would have, stood dumb when your betraying sisters wept by the side of the railings, who would have connived in civilized outrage. They could not actually react against this. Their outrage was quite, civilized. And here, connive means to do nothing to stop somebody doing something wrong. So, would connive in civilized outrage, it understand the exact and tribal intimate revenge. They understand the tribal revenge, the intimate revenge, because somebody has done something wrong, and that is why this kind of punishment was given. So the poem described the punishment which was given to a little adulteress for the crime which she committed. The girl had been stripped, shaved, blindfolded, and drowned in a pet bog. Uh, you know, when you read the history, actually, you find out that it's thought that she was drowned for adultery, as in those times this was a common practice by certain Germanic tribes. So the poet brings before us the theme of the violence, the theme of atrocity, by depicting the picture of this little adulteress here in the poem Punishment. I hope the ideas are clear to you. Thank you.